We are not in war with Russia. Stubb on Trump's remarks on shutting down Russian drones. Trump greenlights Ukraine to strike deep inside Russia. And how European Council chief urges EU capitals to unblock Ukrainians' accession process by bypassing Hungary. The latest news next. In an interview with CNN, Finnish President Alexander Stubb said Finland is not at war with Russia and that when it comes to Moscow's air provocations, the key here is not to overreact. Quote, "We are not in war with Russia," Stubb said, commenting on the statement of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, that both NATO and Europe have declared war on Russia over Ukraine. The president of Finland also believes that in relations with Russia, a carrot and stick approach is needed.
In the beginning, we've tried the carrot, and now President Trump is showing the stick, and I think the statement on the shooting down airplanes is one of that part.
Mr. President, while we understand the importance of measured responses, is there not a point at which not overreacting begins to look like underreacting, or worse, ignoring clear and escalating threats? Russia is no longer just testing the limits with drones or airspace provocations. It is actively probing the West's willingness to respond. What will Finland do when it's not just drones or aircraft, but uniformed Russian soldiers testing your border? How many more protocols must be followed before decisive action is taken? Isn't there a danger that this kind of strategic patience sends a signal of permissiveness and invites further aggression? In your view, when does deterrence begin, and when does the stick you mentioned actually come into play? Not just from allies like President Trump, but from Finland itself. The media outlet notes that in this way, Stubb commented on the recent agreement of White House head Donald Trump that NATO countries may shoot down Russian aircraft in their airspace. Quote, "I think this is a strong deterrent coming from the President of the United States," the politician added. Stubb explained how to respond to airspace violations. The President of Finland noted that the Russian Federation is waging a conventional war with Ukraine and a hybrid one in the West. Therefore, in situations of Russia's air provocations in Europe and NATO countries, the main thing is not to react too violently, Stubb believes.
What we need to do in these kinds of situations is two things. One, we stay calm, and second, we make sure that we attribute when necessary and build up defenses so that it doesn't happen again. But the key here is not to overreact.
Stubb's reaction to a possible violation of Finland's airspace. Also during the interview, CNN asked Stubb what his reaction would be to a violation of his country's airspace, in particular whether he would order drones to be shut down.
We have protocols. So basically what happens is that first we verify, then we announce, and then the Air Force decides what needs to happen.
Russia is watching, and every calm, delayed or cautious response is read not as restraint but as weakness. The question is no longer if Russia will escalate, but whether you will be ready when it does. Commenting on some ideological differences between Europe and the United States, Stubb emphasized common values.
I am the president of Finland, so for me, it is very important to get along with the president of the United States. I don't see red or blue, I see stars and stripes.
As is known, in recent days, Trump responded that NATO countries may shut down Russian aircraft in the event of a violation of their airspace. At the same time, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that Russian aircraft would be shut down in the U.S. if they carried out attacks. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte stated that the decision to shut down such aircraft would be made based on intelligence about the level of threat. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia is using tankers to launch drones at European countries.
Intelligence now indicates that the Russians are using tankers to launch and operate drones against European countries.
He added that Ukraine expects Europe to make decisions this week regarding pressure on Russia. At least a 19th sanctions package is expected. It is especially important that sanctions hit painfully at Russia's energy trade and the entire infrastructure of its tanker fleet, the president said. This revelation is deeply alarming but sadly not surprising. Russia's use of commercial tankers to launch and control drones against European countries is a blatant escalation of hybrid warfare, turning civilian infrastructure into weapons platforms. These tactics blurs the lines between military and civilian targets and poses a grave threat not only to Ukraine but to the entire European continent. Europe cannot afford to remain passive or slow to respond. The urgency to impose severe and targeted sanctions on Russia's energy sector and tanker fleet infrastructure has never been greater. Allowing this shadow fleet to operate freely is tantamount to enabling Russia's aggression by proxy. If Europe fails to act decisively now, it risks emboldening Russia to further exploit civilian assets for military aggression, undermining regional security and international law. The time for half measures is over. Europe must demonstrate unity and resolve in shutting down every possible channel of Russian aggression. US President Donald Trump has authorized Ukraine to launch long-range strikes against Russia, according to US Special Envoy Kit Kellogg on Fox News. Kellogg says Donald Trump authorized long-range strikes against Russia, but occasionally, Ukraine has not been granted authority by the Pentagon to carry them out. Everybody should follow what the president says. He is the commander-in-chief by the Constitution, and everybody falls in line. The special envoy for Ukraine notes, when asked by the host whether the US president's position is that Ukraine can launch long-range strikes against Russia, that this was authorized by the president, Kellogg replied.
I think reading what he has said and reading what Vice President Vance has said, as well as Secretary Rubio, the answer is yes. Use the ability to hit deep. There are no such things as sanctuaries.
This authorization significantly expands Ukraine's military capabilities, allowing it to strike deep within Russian territory. It sends a strong signal that Ukraine is empowered to defend itself proactively and deter further aggression. Such a move strengthens Ukraine's negotiating position by demonstrating serious leverage and resolve. It pressures Russia to reconsider its actions and opens new path toward a more balanced dialogue. This step is a crucial boost for Ukrainian sovereignty and for reshaping the strategic landscape in Europe. European Council President Antonio Costa has taken the lead in advancing Ukraine's EU membership bid despite opposition from Hungary ahead of a key summit of EU leaders in Copenhagen this week, reported by Politico. According to 5 diplomats and officials who agreed to speak to the media outlet on condition of anonymity, Costa is rallying the support of EU capitals to unblock negotiations on the future membership of Ukraine and Moldova. His diplomatic push is an attempt to bypass Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who is wielding his veto to block Ukrainians' path to the EU. Under Costa's proposal, the so-called negotiating clusters could be opened with the approval of a qualified majority of EU countries rather than by unanimous decision. The closure of clusters would still require the support of all EU capitals, but lowering the threshold for launching talks would allow Ukraine and Moldova to begin the necessary reforms to demonstrate progress in aligning with the EU standards. This would make it possible to move the membership bids of both countries forward, even if 1 or 2 states opposed it. A source familiar with the plan explained. According to the diplomats, Costa has been actively persuading European leaders during a recent tour of capitals where he met several European heads of government, as well as in bilateral talks on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York last week.
Enlargement is an important priority for the President of the European Council, said one of the officials. He sees it as the most important geopolitical investment the EU can make. That's why he believes it is important to continue discussing avenues to ensure that Ukraine's reform efforts can be translated into tangible steps.
EU Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos will visit Ukraine on Monday, the 29th of September, where the screening of legislation required for further progress in the candidacy process is being completed.
All clusters have been screened in record time. Ukraine has delivered. Ukraine is ready for the next step. It's now up to member states to give the green light, Kos told Politico's Brussels playbook. Both Ukraine and Europe cannot afford to see Ukraine's momentum for reforms slow down. This is the moment to accelerate.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching this video. Support Ukraine, like and subscribe.